the Browns bought Myles Garrett's loyalty this offseason after spending the bulk of the early part of the offseason in Super Bowl week, finding every camera and microphone and basically saying, hey, Browns don't know what they're doing. They can't win. I want to go somewhere and win at the highest level, compete at the highest level. I want my sacks to matter. I want to be put in a position to make plays when it matters the most. The Browns then said, hey, how's $40 million a year? Will that work for you? And Myles said, yeah, sure. I think I can be happy in Cleveland now for that kind of money. So as the old saying goes, with a big contract comes a lot of responsibility. Is Myles Garrett ready to step up? Listen, he's already the franchise sack leader. He's been an NFL Defensive Player of the Year. This is what Myles said during mandatory minicamp.
I mean, I look forward to having my best season, for sure. I think it's trending that way. Feeling really good. I think everything's pointing in that direction. And I like where we are as a defense unit. It's really firing, really rolling. I think it's really clicking as far as the scheme and the plays, especially early on. That's big.
Over under for him, 12.5 sacks there, Danny. But to me, it's not, for now, it's not about the sack total.
So what's it about for you if it's not about the sack total? Because I do think he'll go over 12.5 sacks. I think he'll have a very good season on paper. And I think he's going to rack up the statistics because Myles Garrett is very good at doing that. And he is, I think, the best pass rusher in the NFL. So I expect him to, as he said, maybe have his best season yet as somebody who's in his physical prime. But if it's not about that for you, Daryl, what is it about?
I just think it's about the evolution of him as a leader. Because when you pay that kind of money, fair or not, and look, I have argued in the past that I honestly don't think Myles is a leader. And that's not a dig at him. I just don't think like that's his personality. I just think he is a guy who is always prepared to play no matter what. He goes out there, he does his job. He does his job at a high level. And he is not the rah-rah guy. He just goes out and just does what he's supposed to do. And you take in, it's similar to Joe Flacco, right? I'm not going to sit here and yell at you and berate you and scream at you and poke and prod you to do what you're supposed to do as a professional, okay? But what I will do is make sure that when I come in the building each and every day, I'm just going to do my thing. And whatever you absorb from that, that's leadership. But I also kind of feel like when you give him, after he does the 180 from get me out of here and get me out of here as quickly as possible to, oh yeah, I'm going to have my best season. I really believe in the organization and the direction we're going in and this, that, and the other. After, again, just weeks earlier telling us how these folks don't know what they're doing and they're not going to win at the highest level and they're not going to put you in a position to get those 12.5 plus sacks in meaningful spots, right? Because your team is sub 500 every year, finishing in last place.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like that the onus now is on him to evolve into a leader. Fair or not, whether it fits his personality or not, I just feel the circumstances dictate now that he's got to take the bull by the horns and he really has to take the mantle of leadership with this, because it can't be the quarterback, right? They don't have that guy.
Yep.
Nick Chubb isn't here anymore.
Correct.
Can't be him.
Not that I necessarily even looked at him as a leader.
Again, he was a lead by example. I just keep my mouth shut, go out and do my job, right? This organization has suffered from inauthentic leadership, in my view, where they have team captains that shouldn't have been team captains. They have guys who have said that they're leaders that, well, I don't know that I would have those guys be leaders. And again, I'm not taking shots at people. It's just like leadership has to be authentic.
Yes, and that is the biggest thing with Myles, is that I don't think that he is an authentic leader, and that's fine because not everybody is. And I used to be in the camp that Myles Garrett needs to be a better leader, and he needs to, because of how good he is, which is not a debatable thing, he is one of the premier players in the NFL. You want that guy ideally to also be the face of your franchise, the voice in your locker room, the captain that deserves to be it, the one that the buck stops with him. But I've also, I think, come to the realization, Daryl, that if you fake those things, and I'm not saying that Myles is, because I don't think he has, but if you fake those things, that's actually worse than being not a leader. I would rather somebody not be a leader than somebody have the inauthentic leadership qualities that really could drag you down, because I do think that people in the locker room see right through that. And that, to me, like I said, is worse than not actually being a leader, is being a fake leader.
Like me, you've been in a variety of locker rooms over the years. How would you, I know how I would define it, but I want to ask you, how would you define leadership in a locker room?
So leadership to me, I do think has to be a vocal thing. I do. I don't view and I understand that not all leadership looks the same, but for me, I have always equated leadership with being vocal. And it doesn't have to be the in your face vocal type of leadership. I think there are different ways that you can be a vocal leader, but I do think, especially when you get to the pros, when you get to this level where everybody's great and nobody gets to this level without being great at what they do. You don't fake your way into the NFL, right? You don't fake your way into the NBA. So I do think that the whole leading by example thing doesn't necessarily make you a leader. Now, you can lead by example and be somebody that's very good and somebody that is certainly well respected, but I don't look at you as like the team captain type of guy if you're a lead by example guy. You can be somebody that is respected, that guys look up to, but ultimately things are going to get tough in every sport for every team, no matter who you are. Things are going to get tough. And that's when I think being vocal matters. And the Browns, I don't think right now have that vocal leader. And I don't know the last time. I mean, I look at maybe Baker Mayfield is the last guy that they had that was like that. And I do think that is something that's missing. And I think if you're asking,
come on, you mean Jameis Winston giving the pregame rah-rah speech wasn't good enough for you last year?
It was funny. Those were funny. I enjoyed those, but that's not leadership to me. That is comedy to me, which Jameis could have a great future in that if he chooses. But I look at this and say the Browns don't have the vocal leadership they need. And if you're asking Myles Garrett to do that, you're asking him to be somebody who he very clearly is not. And I think asking somebody to be somebody they're not is a little bit worse.
This is what Jim Schwartz had to say during minicamp about Myles Garrett after everything that transpired this offseason, and now Garrett being paid to be back on board.
I really think Myles is going to have the best season of his career. Has to, right? So I've told him before, what's that Spider-Man quote? With great power comes great responsibility, right? With the big contract, with the notoriety that came along with that, and the process that took to get him to that point. I mean, there's always pressure in this league, but probably a little bit more so.
So that's Jim Schwartz. We got to work on him with the superhero quotes. Get it to flow a little smoother.
Yeah, doesn't he know Myles is a Batman guy?
Clearly not. Let's sneak in Sean. He's on the road this morning. Sean, good morning. You're first up on the Fan. How are you doing, bud?
Good, Daryl. How about you?
I'm doing all right, man.
So I almost agree with everything you're saying. So just because somebody is good at their job doesn't mean that they have to be a leader. Just because somebody gets paid a buttload of money does not mean that they have to be a leader. Myles Garrett is a great example of what a mentor is, right? He goes out there, does his job, he coaches up the younger talent, and he goes home at the end of the day. We did not pay Myles to be a leader. We paid Myles to be the defensive player of the year. That's how I feel about it anyways.
I don't think you're wrong, Sean. I look at this and say leadership is not something that you can fake. And I don't think Myles Garrett should be in the business of faking it. I think Myles Garrett's job is to go out there and, as Sean said, be the best defensive player in football. And I think he has done a pretty good job of doing that, Daryl. I don't think that you can look at anyone else in the NFL and say that guy's been a better defensive player than Myles Garrett by a wide margin over the last 5 years. I don't think somebody like that exists. Are there better leaders out there? Absolutely. I could point to a number of guys and say, yes, that person's a better leader than Myles. But in Myles' contract, they're not paying him $40 million to be a leader. They're paying him $40 million a year to be the best defensive end in football. And I think the chances of him doing that are pretty good.
Yeah, I just, when you're handing out the captain badges, because he's going to get one again this year. And I'm not disagreeing with you, but then I don't know if you can make him a captain. Because how Kevin Stefanski does the captain thing, it's voted on by the players. So it's a popularity contest. Deshaun Watson voted team captain.
I think there's much more of an issue with that than Myles Garrett being a captain. Because I do think there's something to having your best player be a captain, which Myles Garrett far and away has been. So, like, I do think there's something to that.
Well, what I wanted to ask you is being a team captain different from being a leader?
That's interesting. I think that you don't have to necessarily be the best leader to be a captain. And I don't think that the best leaders are always captains, because I do think there is that element of it sometimes being a popularity contest. Now, in an ideal world, your leaders are your captains and your best players are your leaders, and therefore your best players are your captains too. And I look at this and say it would feel wrong if Myles Garrett's making $40 million a year and is the best player on the team by a wide margin and is not a captain. But I also feel wrong asking Myles Garrett, because this is not who he has shown to be from a personality standpoint. I feel wrong asking him to be the voice of this team too.
And that's what I struggle with.
What's the captain's job, though, Daryl?
Lead stretching.
Okay.
Right?
I mean,
go out for
the ref during the game, right?
Go out for the coin toss.
Call heads or tails.
Yeah, I don't think you need. I mean, if you're looking at leaders, who's the real leaders on the defense? Who were the leaders on the defense last year? I'd say Rodney McLeod was more of a leader than Myles Garrett was. That's because he's a vocal guy who's trying to motivate his teammates through, his words, right? He didn't need to wear the C for that. The same thing as he didn't need to go out and pick heads or tails, right? The captain is a representative of the group in a more formal setting. I think people get that misconstrued with leader a lot. There does need to be a leader. Denzel's probably the leader of the defense, right? As far as like the guy you're going to for the inspiration. But even then, I don't know that they have a true guy that's stood out. It's been Anthony Walker in the past, right? The 1-year contract guy.
Right.
It's it's been JOK until he got hurt, right? I don't know who the true leader is. We probably got to find that out. That's why we need a month and a half or 2 months of training camp, Daryl. Figure out who the leaders are.
That's a good point.
I really think Myles is going to have the best season of his career. Has to, right? So I've told him before, what's that Spider-Man quote? With great power comes great responsibility, right? With the big contract, with the notoriety that came along with that, and the process that took to get him to that point. I mean, there's always pressure in this league, but probably a little bit more so.
If not Myles, who? That's the question we're asking. Daryl Ryder, Danny Cunningham in for Ken Carman and Anthony Lama. The boys will be back with you next week. Training camp officially, well, it's been underway. The rookies reported last week. Veterans reported yesterday. But today is the first full squad workout around 4 o'clock this afternoon. I'll be out there. We'll hear from some players earlier in the day, in the noon hour. We'll start hearing from a couple of guys. So we'll have coverage of that for you. Fans are invited out to Berea Friday, 2 p.m. practice. That is the first one of 8 that will be open to the public. 216-474-0092. That was defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz talking about Myles Garrett, Danny, and the expectations that come with the big contract. We're talking about leadership this morning. Who's going to take the mantle of leadership in that locker room for this team? That's not really in Myles' wheelhouse. That's not really his personality. He is just go out and beat up quarterbacks guy. Maybe not the rah-rah guy, but somebody has to do that for this team, and you can't just be the rah-rah guy without producing. We saw that last year with Jameis Winston.
Right.
You had mentioned the comedic value that came with some of those pregame speeches. I found it laughable that he's doing the pregame huddle chants or whatever you want to call them.
The pep talk.
The pep talk before they go on the field. And Deshaun Watson, who's the starting quarterback at the time, is just standing around taking it all in. And I don't know how that dynamic works. And I'm not saying that Myles
Well, it doesn't. That's the thing. It does not work.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny, but it does not work. You do, I think, to some extent, need your best players to be your leaders. And that is, I think, one of the biggest drawback with Myles is that he's just not.
And if it's not going to be him, right? Because when you look at this team right now, I don't know that, I think Denzel Ward, again, is a leader by the way he plays, similar to Myles. But when I'm looking at this team on both sides of the ball, Danny, I couldn't. David Njoku?
I don't see it.
Is he? Is it going to be Joel Bitonio? Because
Probably.
He's a 12, 13-year vet?
Within that room, I would bet that he is. I would bet that Joel is a very
I can
vocal
predict the captains
leader
right now.
inside the offensive line room.
But who's the guy that's going to make sure that, for lack of a better phrase, guys come correct every day? The guys are ready to work every day. Kevin Stefanski has talked about this offseason, and I think it's a fair point about the need to toughen this team up, because that 17-game gauntlet, it really is a war of attrition, not just from health, but from a mental standpoint, obviously the physical toll it takes on you, and from a win-loss standpoint. And so who's going to be the guy that's going to carry them to the finish line, who when things do go poorly, and look, there at some point this season, things are going to go poorly.
At a lot of points this season, it will.
Well, potentially.
Most points, in fact.
Who's going to be that guy to pick up that mantle? Who do you think it can be? Who do you think it could be? 216-474-0092. Let's head out to Eastlake. Peter, good morning. You're next up on the Fan. How you doing, bud?
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing all right.
Same. Myles isn't a rah-rah leadership guy. I mean, he's a soft-spoken. He does poetry. I mean, Myles he's not a do what I do as I say, not what I do guy. He's a do what I do guy. I'm putting in the work, and he's one of those guys that sits back, and then when he steps up to talk, it's going down, so everyone should be quiet. That's the type of leader at least I see Myles as, and I think the proof is in the pudding, because they had a rah-rah leadership guy in Baker Mayfield, and didn't that rub Myles the wrong way? Wasn't that abrasive? Well, I feel like it's kind of hitting everyone in the face. Myles isn't a rah-rah guy, and I think this is why losing JOK was a twofold problem, because JOK was turning into a wonderful linebacker, but also a huge leadership piece in the middle of the defense. And he was one of those guys that I thought was going to step up and take the mantle as captain and leader of the defense in terms of speaking up. And I just don't think Myles is the kind of guy that does that.
All right. Thanks so much, Peter, for the call. Yeah, I just, if it's not going to be him, like, and we talked about earlier, Danny, like, about this and how maybe it's unfair for me to put it on Myles because of the contract. But the reason I'm doing that is because I do look at the team and someone's got to do it. And this is a guy that, expressed his frustrations. And look, I'm not criticizing Myles for doing that, because I think Myles spoke for all Browns fans. I really sincerely believe that. When he's like, the reason I want to leave is because we can't win. I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of being in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year and racking up all these sacks when I'm not doing any, when the team's not doing anything to perform alongside me, right? And that was real, legitimate criticism levied by Myles. But now it's like, okay, what are you going to do now that you're bought back in multiple ways for $40 million a year? Now that you're bought back in, what can you do to help turn that around? What are you going to do to make it better?
I do think that some leadership from him would be nice. I just don't. I also think that inauthentic leadership is worse than fake leadership, or inauthentic leadership is worse than not actually being a leader. I think trying too hard is something that you see in this locker room, in any professional locker room. Guys see through that. And is it Myles's fault that he's not a leader? No. That's just not how he's wired. And you can't ask him to be wired in a way that he's not actually.
Who do they turn to then? Like okay, so
I don't have a good answer. And that is a big problem with this roster is that they don't have that.
He has a chance to be a leader in the sense that's not the loud guy, as long as he's the guy that's holding everyone accountable and also producing. He's got to produce.
I'm not worried about
he's
that.
going to paid
He'll
to be productive, right? So he's got to do that, right? And then he's got to hold others accountable when they are lacking. And you can do that without being the cheerleader, right? That's
right.
Baker.
Again, I'm not saying they need a cheerleader.
Right.
Like, that's not what I'm saying. Jameis Winston last year was a cheerleader.
Right.
Right. And it worked for like the first 2 games that he started. Then he started throwing footballs and touchdown passes to the other team. And then that just didn't matter. Right. And this is what I'm struggling with. Right? Somebody is going to have to be that guy in the locker room. And sometimes being that guy means you got to be the bad guy.
That's where I say
you're not friends
holding
with
people accountable. And even if it's, holding the offensive accountable if they're underperforming, or holding a specific, unit of the offense accountable. If it's, we all are, saying that they're going back to the Stefanski offense of 2020, in which they ran the ball,
ground and pound
to set up anything else, but the run was the feature, right? So if we're at a point week 4, 5, 6 where they're not getting it done, and it's because the interior of the offensive line, is old and aged, there's a way to still be respectful while still holding a Joel Bitonio and holding those guys accountable on the interior of the offensive line, and making sure that everyone in the city who is paying attention to this at all times knows that the effort is being put in. We're just not seeing the results right now.
Do you think at this point in Myles Garrett's career, he can grow into that vocal leader type of guy? Do you think that is a legitimate thing that can happen?
I don't think so. And again, this isn't a shot. It's just not who he is at his core. Like, I am a believer in you stick to strengths. You ask your people to do what they do well, and you accept the things that they don't do well or that they're not comfortable with. And I just never viewed Myles as a guy that is going to police a locker room.
Yeah.
I've never viewed him. And again, I'm not criticizing him, but that's what they need. They need somebody that's going to police that locker room because of the concerns, questions that need answered in the train. That's one of them, leadership. Another thing is the offensive line deep enough. Okay. So we feel good about the starters up front, but odds are they're not getting through 17 games healthy. In recent years, they've not gotten through 17 games healthy. We know the injury history of Jack Conklin. We know the injury history of DeJuan Jones, and let's give DeJuan his flowers this morning. He's done a lot of work this offseason to reshape his body and try and put himself in a position where he can be healthy. But is that deep enough? The fact that Quinshon Judkins is dealing with his legal issue may or may not be available to this football team. It's at some point early in the season here. Like, do they need another running back? Because this is supposed to now be a staple of this offense. We're jumping in our DeLoreans, going back to 2020, 2021, where you're trying to do the Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, recreate that whole bit, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands, 3 Mississippi fire, quick slants, quick outs, check downs. That's that quick, tempo, paced, efficient offense while running the football and just, grinding your opponents to a bloody pulp. Like, I don't know if they can do that right now. So the running back, in my view, the depth of that particular position, I think is a bit of a question. Obviously, Dylan Sampson, they drafted him in the 4th round out of Tennessee. You got Pierre Strong, you got Jerome Ford, but I don't know that that's enough without Judkins in the fold. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball, and I know we've been talking a lot about Myles this morning, Danny, but like, I think the secondary is deep enough. But linebacker, now, admittingly, and Jim Schwartz will tell you this, he has told us this on multiple occasions, linebacker's not it's not the centerpiece of this this defense, I should say, but it's still an important piece.